I'm criminal defense attorney Aaron J. Boria, and today, love is in the air. It's Valentine's Day, and what better day than today to talk about spousal privilege? There are two types of spousal privilege: the testimonial privilege and the communication privilege. The testimonial privilege means while you and your spouse are married, if the prosecution in your case tries to call your spouse as a witness to testify in that case, your spouse can refuse to testify. Once the two of you are divorced, that privilege ends. They can be called as a witness. The communication privilege lives on in perpetuity. So if you and your spouse had a private conversation while you were married, even after you are divorced, prosecution in that scenario could not call your now ex-spouse to the stand and have them testify to the private conversation that the two of you had while you were married. There are exceptions to the rule. A domestic violence case where your spouse is also the victim. Divorce, bigamy, if the two of you have a child who is the victim in a case, they could be compelled to testify or be called to the stand, as well as any case involving a minor child. The privilege would not apply in those cases. Let me give you an example as to how this works. I'm married. I tell my wife, tomorrow night, I am going to rob a bank. Then, the following night, I'm not home and a bank gets robbed. The police suspect it's me. Ultimately, I get arrested and I go to trial. In that scenario, the prosecution cannot force my wife to testify against me because we're married. Same scenario, but after the robbery, my wife and I get a divorce. Now, the prosecution can call my wife to the stand because the testimonial privilege has ended, but the communication privilege lives on forever. So, in that scenario, if the prosecution asks my wife, did your husband tell you he was going to rob the bank? She cannot be compelled to answer that question. However, if the prosecution asks my wife, was your husband home the next night? That question she has to answer because now she's on the stand and that answer does not involve a communication her and I had. It's simply, was he home or not? So obviously there's a greater protection if the two of you are still married. The other thing to keep in mind, the biggest caveat of them all, is that as a defendant, it's not my privilege, it's my spouse's privilege. So if my wife decides she wants to testify against me anyway, she wants to reveal the private communication we had together anyway, that's her prerogative. She's allowed to do that. So there's the old adage, happy wife, happy life. Keep that in mind. Keep your spouses happy, defendants. I'm criminal defense attorney Aaron J. Boria, and if you've been charged with a crime, call me today, 734-453-7806, or shoot me an email at borialaw@gmail.com. I'm happy to fight for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy Valentine's Day.